guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Kip on the Lip, and I'm here with what's going to be a sad video for me, but one that I definitely need to get done, and that is the final one I'm going to be doing on Assault Sicily. Now, the reason I'm finishing this one up is just I've run out of time. I've covered a lot of this game, and I've had a blast with it. I went ahead and played ahead just a little bit, a few more turns up from where we had left off previously, and I know I was wanting to do more of it, but this is already like, what, six, 7 videos in so far on this game. And I've just got to clear off some space for some other stuff that is coming up. But I did want to finish strong and cover a few things that we hadn't seen so far in the game. Now, where I did leave off, I wanted to touch on what all had happened so far in the game. And the Americans did well. And it's partly due to my defensive playing style. I usually like to hunker in, bunker down, do as much damage from range, and then go in, and that just did not work well for the Italians. The Italians pretty well lost double the forces that the Americans did up until this point. I think we're on turn 4 or 5 right now. They lost all their tanks over here on the right side. They still have the Lancia that survived a few good hits. The Sherman's still kicking. It did some damage, took out the Renaults. They're gone. The Samvante went out. And with them being gone, that pretty well, settled the deal on what we were going to see. Over here, the Italians did a little better. They lost some units, but the Americans lost some of their units. I think the Americans have lost mainly infantry up until this point. I think a couple of Rangers and a bazooka team had been taken out so far. The one that was wounded over here, the one that was wounded over here, and the Italians actually were able to flank around. They're almost over to this victory point, and more than likely they'd probably push up and get to it because there's only that 75 mil gun, which, while good, really can't defend against swarming infantry. So I would anticipate the Italians pushing on, and I would love to have more time to actually play this out and see how it goes, but my guess is that the Italians aren't going to do too well because they've lost their push on this side. While they could push on this left flank, the right flank pretty well collapsed. They had some bad rolls. The Americans had some good rolls. And the fact that the Americans are hardened and in excellent defensive positions pretty well decided the match over here versus them. Plus, the Sherman is a little bit better than the Renaults, so the Sherman was able to keep kicking versus those Renaults. And I thought the Sherman had actually had a wound. I think I might accidentally pulled it off when I was clearing off the counters from the previous turn, but oh well, it's not that big of a deal. But that's where I'm going to end things at this point. The Italians just don't have the forces left, I think, necessary to push in and really dig the Americans out. They could probably get this victory point here on the left flank, and they would hold that one, but that would still leave 3 in the American hands, which is nowhere near an Italian victory. But I do want to talk about some final thoughts about the game and cover some things that I hadn't covered yet, which is the rest of the new stuff, right? So airstrikes and artillery strikes. Basically, just want to kind of run those and let you guys see how they play and then give some final thoughts. Now, we'll do airstrike second because that would happen later on in the game. The artillery strike is very similar to what we've already seen from the support phase with the indirect fire, okay? Only difference here, since this is a command card, you've got to apply a command point to it, all right? So you would be putting a command point on this card, same with the airstrike card, if you are using those command points, which I highly recommend you do because they are excellent when it comes to this game. And just like in any other indirect fire, you need to have a spotter. So let's say we have our spotter here. We'd mark him with that same -1 attack die. And for them, I would want him to spot over here against this LMG squad that's way here on the left because that's the biggest threat. And I could call it down anywhere that I could see. But I would want to probably take that down. Yeah, these rifles are a problem, but those LMGs put out a lot of hurt. So it'd do good to get rid of them. That forces these guys to have to cross no man's land. So anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Thing with artillery strike cards, though, is that you have the ability to have more than one strike with those. And you can call them in a varying number of ways. You can call them in against a target. You can call them in a suppressive fire, trying to kind of like space it out. You can call them in directing it towards a specific thing. So let's say you wanted to rubble a building or a fortification. You can use an artillery strike, an offboard artillery strike for that as well. And then you see they also have that blast value, right? And that blast value comes into play when you have that uncanceled crit that can cause buildings to collapse or ground to rubble, stuff like that, right? So we've got our player aid here, and you see it's got some stuff explaining how you're going to do it when it comes to your offboard artillery. There is a different way that spotting is done, and it has a specific chart that's listed here. But basically, depending on the counter, whatever admin counter is on the unit that you're targeting, whether it be a fast action or they're hidden or they're suppressed or whatever it is, you're going to be rolling a d6 and then referencing different columns. Sometimes it might be nothing, or depending on terrain, you would use this farthest right thing. And you're going to roll that d6, and it's going to determine what type of bonus that target might get. And then when you do your actual attack, they're going to get the same stuff that they would get normally. So whatever terrain bonus that they get and whatever overhead defensive die that they get. So if you're calling in against a vehicle, their upper armor is again what you're using. Same with infantry, but infantry are usually the same all the way around. All right, so let's run this just as a quick example. We've got, for the attack, we'll go ahead and pull it out. That's for our attack because we're attacking infantry, right? So it's infantry or artillery. You're going to be looking at that lower value. Now, that target that you see on the right, that would be a modifier that applies if you're doing a second strike. So for this one, for an example, I could call in an artillery strike against him, and then either a second follow-on attack against the same target, or a target within 2 hexes, or a completely separate target, but then I would need a completely separate spotter that would also receive that -1 attack die. So there's multiple ways that you can do that. And if you do that second strike, you would apply that number, whatever's there. Here for us, it's a 0, but if it was a plus or a minus, you would apply that when it came to your spotting attempt for that second attack, okay? So let's say for these guys, we're just gonna run this once just to show what happens. I know they would get an inherent yellow, and then they get, I think, a yellow and a blue for a light force, yellow and a green for a light force. So that's where they're at now. And we roll a d6 to see where their spotting is going to be. 1, not very good. That's actually excellent for them. And they actually get another yellow, which I do not have, so I'd have to give it to them. Give them another one here in a minute. But you see I rolled a 1. I would reference back over there to the top. And if you are calling in danger close, right, so close to your own guys, rolling a 1 or under can have possible ramifications with offboard artillery and airstrikes, right? So the part that we're going to cover next, and you see down here, it talks about it, friendly fire. So that can happen. You have to be careful about that friendly fire, and it does reference it down here at the bottom of the player aid. So that comes in play when you're doing that spotting attempt. We don't have any of our guys near that, none of the Americans near, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's roll our attack and see what we get. I just need to remember they have 1 more yellow coming to them for the spotting attempt. And of course, the yellows come out really good. So they got 6 hits. That is beautiful, beautiful. We'll roll their defense. And actually, let me do this here. And I'll take this yellow up for their defense. Oh, and they are gone just like that. Boom. Blatted off the board. Because of course they were. Because the Italians have just had a bad run of things. Now, like I said, I could call in another artillery strike somewhere else or within 2 hexes. 2 hexes would be the same spotter, but since there is no enemy within 2 hexes, I would have to use a separate spotter. I would be penalized basically again for doing that second follow-on strike, but it would be done the exact same way. And again, there is a blast value here that could apply if we had an uncanceled crit. We didn't have an uncanceled crit. We just had a buttload of uncanceled hits. So that is how you're going to run your offboard artillery cards. Extremely powerful, extremely versatile, just like your Airstrike cards are going to be, but they come into play when you have to use your command points towards it. Watch the live game that I played with Wolfgang, where I did have a cruiser that I got to use for offboard strikes. And it was great, but I had to use a counter, one of my command tokens, towards that. And that is a key thing that you have to pick, because that's the choice between activating a tank or some infantry or calling in that strike. Is that strike worth it? In this case, that strike was absolutely worth it. So let's continue on. Let's go on and see how the Italians respond with their airstrike. Now, looking at the top of this, just like it does on our artillery cards, it has where it's going to come into play. For the artillery card here, it was support phase, so you would do it then. Now, before I forget to mention, you do have to decide during the planning phase for both of these cards. So if you're going to use them, you put that command token during the planning phase. So like I was saying, you got to put a command token on them to use them. So you have to make that decision during the planning phase. Here, this is used during the action phase rather than the support phase, like that indirect fire from the offboard artillery was used. Same type of stats, though. Same stuff that we're looking at comes into play here, but now we are doing that differently, and we have the tactical air support. And there is a strike here, but there's spotting that comes into play and AA units that come into play, because you'll notice that this card has a little shield symbol on it, and that comes into play when they are attacked, because these aircraft can be shot at by AA units. Now, I don't have any AA units. I don't believe it's the 50 cal AA in this one. No, it isn't listed down as AA. I don't believe the tank can either. I mean, they've got 50 cals. They could shoot at it, but if you have a unit that's anti-aircraft, it can fire at incoming aircraft within range. And there's a range that comes into play. You see here, close, medium, long. And then different dice will be rolled depending on your range and so on. Now, when it comes to the spotting's a little different here versus the way it's done in the offboard artillery. See here, it's also a D6 roll depending on the terrain. So there's either a terrain bonus or no terrain bonus. And depending on what you get here, it's going to apply a modifier to what happens here. So there's basically like two rolls that happen, all right? Same type of chart we saw for the offboard artillery, but there is a spotting attempt that is done here. Let's see, what do we want to go after for the Italians? I kind of want to go after that gun. We'll go after this 75 mil gun over here, because they have a better chance, this aircraft does, against artillery than it does a tank. And this being taken out pretty much leaves this whole left side open for their infantry to come in and they could swoop on around. So they'll target this 75 mil gun. That would give them 2 yellows, a green, and a blue. But now we got to figure out what's going to happen with the defensive die. We'll look at our terrain for Rocky. We'll get a yellow and a blue. And that's not the type of blue I need. And we'll also get that blue for being hardened. Okay. So that's where we're at. And the inherent, I believe, yellow for the field gun. All right. So that's where our defense is currently. But now we got to figure out, based off of this, what's going to happen as far as that goes. So let's roll. They are in a terrain bonus. So we roll on the right side of this chart. Roll, they get a 5. 5 is just going to be success. So that means they've spotted, don't have any modifier over here. If they had gotten a lower number, that would have been better, because it would have given them the 75 mil gun a better chance to get a better defense die. The +1 means a better chance for the attackers to take away any defensive die or reduce it. All right, so we just do a normal D6. He doesn't have any counters on him right now, so we're going to be looking at this farthest side. So the best that the 75 mil gun can hope for at this point is a blue or green die. So roll. He got a 3, which will be 1 extra blue die. And that's how you're going to figure out your defensive die and your spotting for your airstrikes. Remember, like I said, there is AA that comes into it. So let's target our 75 mil gun. They have 4 health, so there's a chance he could survive. There's a pretty good chance. Not as bad as that artillery strike. Ooh, if he whiffs it, he goes down. If he whiffs it, because they got 4 hits, which is what they needed. All right. But he's got a good chance. Ooh, let me take that yellow out of there. And, oh, yes, they got it. They blocked it all. So this is the kind of rolls I've been getting for the Americans versus the Italians. They have just held on so hard and not been able to get anything through because of all these defensive dice. That hardened status really makes a difference. Even that just 1 extra blue die adds a lot. And especially if you get elite or veterans, you get to add even better, and then you get to add it to your attacks. Huge, huge swings being able to have units that have that veterancy. All right, so that is how the basic gist is going to work for your offboard and airstrikes and artillery. All right, but they're one-offs. Once you've used them, they're cooked, they're done. That's it. You don't use them anymore unless it's like that off-board artillery that you get to use twice when you do pull it out. So that artillery is a little bit better. So when it comes to the game where I finished up, the Italians have actually lost enough units that they're bumped back up to the point on that board that I was showing you guys earlier. Pull it over. The troop management board here, to where if they lost many more units, which they actually just did, the machine guns, which would be, it's 4 or so points, 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 1 more point and they tick over into the point to where they now start to have to worry about rolling for withdrawals. And like I said, that is something that I really like about this game, something that they added to it, in the fact that you're not going to lose all of your units. Losing a good chunk of your forces will now start to make all of your forces panic, and then you have to worry about them withdrawing, right? But if they survive the withdrawal and you lose more forces, then it starts to be into that surrender phase, and then the actual rout phase where they just, break if you keep surviving, depending on your D6 rolls. But it gets harder and harder to stay. So you can't just slam everything forward and hope for the best versus the dice gods, because there's a very good chance that your forces will withdraw and rout, and then you're just done. You lose automatically. Ultimately, when it comes to Assault Sicily, you guys already know that I like it. It is just more of what was already good with Assault Red Horizon. They have taken what was good there and they've added more to it with the fortifications, with the offboard artillery, with the offboard airstrikes, new units being added to it, and now the troop management board as well. So many moving parts, but it's not too many moving parts. And again, one of my favorite aspects to this is the fact that you have these cards that you're going to have to put your command tokens on. So you've got that that nitty-gritty choice of what units am I going to activate. I'm never going to have enough command tokens. And as I lose units, which again, I wholeheartedly recommend, as you lose units, take and set them to the side and put that command token on them. That way you remember the fact that you have removed that command token from your pool. But those choices really make the difference in the game. Plus, and this is for me, the top, right? The key point that takes this game from good to great. And that's the fact that I could take this map, clear it completely, go to the unit cards, the order of battle cards, and draw out the 3 random cards again, okay? Just leave out the ones that I drew here, right? So we had these 2 for the Americans, and then grab these out here. These 3 for the Italians, because the Italians were the attackers, so they had more unit cards. I could leave these cards out of it, or even just leave them in. Wouldn't matter. and then randomly draw another 3 cards here, another 2 cards here, and the match will play completely different. Same forces, same sides, but there would be new units, right? The Americans might have anti-tank guns. They might have more tanks. They might have more infantry. It would be completely different. Your order of battle is always going to be random because of these cards. That was my favorite thing in Assault Red Horizon. It's my favorite thing with Assault Sicily. It is the point that really just takes this game to that next level. Because like I said, the scenarios that you get in the game, they're always going to play different. When you look at other games, when you pull out that scenario, it lists down what forces you're going to have, and you're always going to have those forces. Here, you're not always going to have those forces. Now, there is one little drawback to it, because sometimes you might draw a card that's not as effective in a scenario. Not necessarily that the card's bad or anything, but it's just not going to be as effective. Maybe one side's very heavy on AT guns and the other side's heavy on tanks, so the tanks are at a disadvantage. They've got a lot going after them. It just depends. But you have that variety. And that's really what does take this game to that next level. And I love that so much, because that order of battle for the scenarios, it's always going to be different. Not to mention the fact that you can switch sides, right? And the rule book even tells you to do that. You have, what is it, green side here, blue side here. You can flip-flop them, right? Have the Americans do the attacking and have the Italians defending, and draw that type of card. Because remember, there are the 3 different types of cards. For the Americans, we had 1 infantry, 1 artillery, and I think it was 2 infantry and a tank. Yeah. And for the Italians, we had 2 infantry and a tank card, right? We could instead draw 1 artillery, 1 infantry for the Italians, and a tank and 2 infantry for the Americans. And the battle's going to play out completely different than it did this time, right? Maybe the Americans would win again while they're on attack. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe the defense would work really well again for the Italians. We don't know. That replay value for this game is just so good. You get so much because the scenarios can be played in so many different ways. So a single scenario in effect is almost like 10 or 12 or 15 scenarios, because of the variety of different units that you can have, and then the variety of being able to change the sides easily if you want to. You're not pigeonholed into anything. You are not stuck playing the Americans here and they're going to have these forces, period. And then playing that out. You play a match like that 2-3 times, you pretty much got a strategy done. You're done. With Assault, you're not going to have that. It's always going to feel fresh. It does get a little fiddly because you have all the cards surrounding the board. I've got a lot of cards at the top of the board for the Italians, over to the side of the board for the Americans. Now you've got the troop management board that you've got to worry about on top of that. So especially if you're playing solitaire, it can get a little unwieldy because you've got so many little moving parts that you have to keep track of. And especially the first few times you play it, it's going to take a little bit. You're going to miss something here. You're going to forget a point there. You're going to forget a command point here. It's going to happen. Don't let it bog you down. Don't let it upset you. It's your game. Have fun with it. Take your time and go slow. But do understand that it's going to be a bit of a table hog. The maps are rather large. The standard size player board is this one here, as you can see as I pull it out. That's a pretty well standard sized map piece, and they're going to be at least 2, 3, 4 of these per map. So it's going to take up a good size table. I mean, if you're a war gamer, generally you're already going to have that, but this is not going to be something you're playing in a small little space because there's just too much spread across the board. But anyway, that is going to be it for me. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. Stay tuned because there will definitely be more Assault on my table because I just love the hell out of this game. It is now one of my top favorite tactical games. I just have a blast with this one because it just plays so freaking well. There's just so much to like on this. I didn't even mention the custom dice. The custom dice. Love the custom dice. You guys know me. Anything I've said before, I've always loved custom dice, something that's different from just the usual D6. I get the biggest kick out of those because there's always that chance, right? No matter how weak your attack is, there's a chance you can squeeze it through, right? You can get that lucky crit and boom, you take out a tank with some bazooka and you're all through. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's moments like that. Again, I reference back to it. Watch the Life game that I played with Wolfgang. That game really did come down to the last moment. Multiple times we were going back and forth, and I thought he had it in the bag. Then I thought I had it in the bag. Then I thought he had it in the bag again. And then I think it was I won right there at the very last moment because his troops ended up routing and I was able to get to the victory point there. Just last possible movement point, was able to get there. So many moments you're going to have with Assault just like that. It is great. All right, but that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Stay tuned. I do have a lot more good series coming for you guys very soon. Y'all take care. I will catch you in the next one.